Chapter 7. The Westing Game. 8 card tables, each with 2 chairs, were arranged in the center of the game room. Sports equipped lined the walls. Hunting rifles, ping-pong paddles, billiard cues, a full rack, Turtle noticed, bows and arrows, darts, bats, rackets, all looked like possible murder weapons to the jittery heirs who were waiting to be told where to sit. Theo wandered over to the chess table to admire the finely carved pieces. Someone had moved a white pawn. Okay, he'll play along. Theo defended the opening with a black knight. On hearing Plum's throat-clearing signal, Sidel Pulowski switched to the painted crutch to her left armpit and flipped to a fresh page of her notebook. 7th, and now, dear friends and relatives and enemies, the game begins. The rules are simple. Number of players, 16, divided into 8 pairs. Each pair will receive $10,000. Each pair will receive 1 pair of clues. Forfeits. If any player drops out, the partner must leave the game. The pair must return the money. Absent pairs forfeit $10,000. Their clues will be held into the next sessions. Players will be given 2 days' notice of the next session. Each pair then give 1 answer. Objective of the game is to win. Did you hear that, Crow? Otis Amber said excitedly. $10,000. Now aren't you glad I made you come? Shh. Now that was Turtle. The object of the game was to win, and she wanted to win. 8th. The heirs will now be paired. When called, go to the assigned table. Your name and position will be read as signed on the receipt. It will be up to the other players to discover who you really are. Madame Soon Lin Hu Cook and Jake Wexler, standing or sitting when not lying down. Grace Wexler did not understand her husband's joke about position. Mr. Hu did, but he was in no mood for humor. $10,000 was at stake. Both pleaded for their absent spouses. Emergency operation. My wife doesn't even speak English. To no avail, table 1 remained empty and moneyless. 2. Turtle Wexler, witch, and Flora Baumbach, dressmaker. Sighs of relief greeted the naming of Turtle's partner, but Flora Baumbach seemed pleased to be paired with the kicking witch. At least her face was still puckered in that elfin grin. Turtle had hoped for one of the high school seniors, especially Doug. 3. Christos Theodorakis, birdwatcher, and D. Denton Deer, intern, St. Joseph's Hospital's Department of Plastic Surgery. Theo protested. He and his brother should be paired together. Chris was his responsibility. Miss Wexler protested. Dr. D should be paired with his bride-to-be. D. Denton Deer protested, but silently. If this had been arranged for free medical advice, they, whoever they are, were mistaken. He was a busy man. He was a doctor, not a nursemaid. But Chris was delighted to be a part of the outside world. He would tell the intern about the person who limped into the Westing house. Maybe that was the murderer. Unless his partner was the murderer, this was so exciting, even better than television. Pair 4, Alexander McSuthers, doorman, and J.J. Ford, judge, Appellate Division of the State Supreme Court. The heirs watched the jaunty doorman pull out a chair for the judge. It had never occurred to them that Sandy was a nickname for Alexander, but that couldn't be what Sam Westing meant by, it will be up to the other players to discover who you really are. Or could it? The judge did not return the chip-toothed smile. Doorman, he calls himself. And the others had signed simple things too. Cook, dressmaker. The podiatrist even made fun of his position. She must seem as pompous as that intern, putting on airs with the title. Well, she had worked hard to get where she was. Why shouldn't she be proud of it? She was no token. Her record was faultless. Watch it, Josie Joe. Westing's getting to you already, and the game has barely begun. Pair 5, Grace Winsor Wexler, heiress, and James Shin Hu, restaurateur. Grace Winsor Wexler ignored the snickers. If she was not the heiress now, she sure would be soon. And what about her clues? Angela's clues, Turtle's clues, Denton's clues, and the clues of Mr. Hu's obedient son. $5,000 lost. Oh well, who needs Jake anyway? She'd win on her own. You'll be happy to know that Mr. Westing was really my Uncle Sam, she whispered to her partner. So what, thought Mr. Hu, $5,000 lost. He should have told his wife about this meeting, dragged her along. Sam Westing, the louse, has cheated him again. Whoever killed him deserves a medal. Pair 6, Erica Crow, Good Salvation Soup Kitchen, and Otis Amber, Deliverer. The delivery boy danced a merry jig, but Crow, her sore foot squeezed back into her tight shoe, headed for table 6 with a grim face. Why were they watching her? Did they think she killed him? Could the guilty know her guilt? Repent. Crow limps. Chris Theodorakis noted. Theodorakis' brother and Doug Hu, first in all-state high school mile run. They slapped hands and Doug jogged to table 7. Theo moved more slowly. Passing the chessboard, he saw that White had made a second move. He countered with a black pawn. Maybe he should not have written brother, but like it or not, that was his position in life. Chris was smiling at him in pure sweetness, which made Theo feel even guiltier about his resentment. I guess that makes us partners, Miss Pulowski, Angela said. Pardon me, did you say something? Sidel Pulowski, secretary to the president. Angela Wexler, none. Angela stepped tentatively behind the secretary, not knowing whether to ignore her disability or to take her arm. At least her partner could not be the murderer, but it was embarrassing being paired with such a... No, she shouldn't feel that way. It was her mother who was upset. She could feel the indignant anger without having to look at Grace. Her perfect daughter paired with a freak. What good luck, the hobbling Sidel Pulowski thought. Now she would really be noticed, with such a pretty young thing for a partner. They might even invite her to the wedding. She'd paint a crutch white with little pink nosegays. Denton Deer was troubled. What in the world did Angela mean by none? None, N-U-N, when she wrote N-O-N-E. Once again, Edgar Jennings Plum cleared his throat. Nasal drip, Dr. Deer whispered, confiding the latest diagnosis to his partner. Chris giggled. What's the kid so happy about? The intern wondered. 9th, money. Each pair in attendance will now receive a check for the sum of $10,000. The check cannot be cashed without the signatures of both partners. Spend it wisely or go broke. May God thy gold refine. A piercing shriek suddenly reminded the Westing heirs of murder. While passing out the checks, the lawyer had stepped on Crow's sword foot. Is this legal, Judge? Sandy asked. It is not only legal, Mr. McSuthers, Judge Ford replied, signing her name to the check and handing it to the doorman. It is a shrewd way of keeping everyone playing this game. 10th, each pair in attendance will now receive an envelope containing a set of clues. No two sets are alike. It is not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. Placing the last of envelopes on table 8, the young lawyer smiled at Angela. Sidel smiled back. This makes no sense, Denton Deer complained. 4 clues typed on cut squares of Westing super-strength paper towels lay on the table before him, arms and elbows at odds, with fingers fans. Chris tried to rearrange the words in some grammatical, if not logical order. Hey, watch it, the intern shouted as one clue wafted to the floor. Flora Bumbuck leaped from her chair to the next table, picked up the square paper, and set it down before the trembling youngster. I didn't see it, she announced loudly. I really didn't, she repeated under the questioning gaze of her partner Turtle, which, the word she had seen was plain. The players protected their clues more carefully now. Hunched over the tables, they moved the paper squares this way and that, mumbling and grumbling. The murderer's name must be here somewhere. Only one pair had not yet seen their clues. At table 8, Sidel placed one hand on the envelope, raised a finger to her lips, and tilted her head towards the other heirs. Just watch and listen. She may be odd, but she's smart, Angela thought. Since each pair had a different set of clues, they would watch and listen for clues to their clues. He, the delivery boy slapped his partner on the back. That's us, old pal, Queen Crow and King Amber. What's this, on or no? Doug turned a clue upside down, then right side up again. Theo jabbed an elbow in his ribs and turned to see if anyone had heard. Angela lowered her eyes in time. J.J. Ford crumpled the clues in her fist and rose in anger. I'm sorry, Mr. McSuthers. Playing the pawn in this foolish game is one thing, but to be insulted with minstrel show dialect? Please, Judge, please don't quit on me, Sandy pleaded. I'd have to give back all that money. It would break my wife's heart and my kids. Judge Ford regarded the desperate doorman without pity. So many had begged before her bench. Please, Judge, I lost my job, my pension. I can't fight. Don't quit just because some nonsensical words. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me, she had chanted as a child. Words did hurt, but she was no longer a child, nor a hanging judge, and there was always a chance. All right, Mr. McSuthers, I'll stay. Judge J.J. Ford sat down, her eyes sparkling with wickedness, and we'll play the game just as Sam Westing would have played it. Mean. Flora Baumbach squeezed her eyes together and screwed up her face. She was concentrating. Haven't you memorized them yet? Turtle didn't like the way Otis Amber's scrawny neck was swiveling high out on his collar. And what was Angela staring at? Yes, I think so, the dressmaker replied, but I can't make heads or tails. Ah, I dropped my bookmark. One by one, she put the clues in her mouth, chewed them, and swallowed them. Gibberish, Mr. Who muttered. Oh, trying to get this. Grace Winsor Wexler agreed. Excuse me, Mr. Plum, but what are these clues to? I mean, exactly, what are we supposed to find? Purple waves, Sandy joked with a wink. Miss Wexler uttered a cry of recognition and changed the order of two of her clues. It's still gibberish, Mr. Who complained. Other players pressed the lawyer for more information. Ed Plum only shrugged. Then could you give us copies of the will? A copy will be on file, Judge Ford began. I'm afraid not, Your Honor, the lawyer said. The will will. He paused and tried again. The will not be filed until the first of the year. My instructions specifically state that no heir is allowed to see any of the documents until the game is over. No copy, that's not fair. But wait, they did have a copy, a shorthand copy. Sidel Pulaski had plenty of attention now. She smiled back at the friendly faces, revealing a lipstick stain on her front teeth. Isn't there some sort of last statement? Sandy asked Plum. I mean, like the intern says, nothing makes any sense. 11th. Senseless, you say. Death is senseless, yet makes way for the living. Life, too, is senseless, unless you know who you are, what you want, and which way the wind blows. So on with the game. The solution is simple. If you know whom you are looking for, but heirs, beware, be aware. Some are not who they say they are, and some are not who they seem to be. And whoever you are... And whoever you are, it's time to go home. God bless you all, and remember this, buy Westing paper products. During the night, Flora Baumbach's itsy-bitsy snowflings raged in a blizzard. The tenants of Sunset Towers awoke from clue-chasing, blood-dripping dreams, bound in twisted sheets and imprisoned by 15-foot snowdrifts. No telephones, no electricity. Snowbound with a murderer. The slow procession looked like some ancient mysterious rite as partner sought out partner on the windowless stairs, and silent pairs threaded through the corridors and the flickering light of crooked color-striped candles, the product of Turtle's stint at summer camp. These handmade candles are both practical and romantic, she said, peddling her wares from the apartment door to frighten tenants at 7 in the morning. Oh, it's only Turtle. And the colored stripes tell time, which is very handy if your electric clock has stopped. Each stripe burns exactly 1/2 hour, more or less. 12 stripes, 6 hours. How much? Not wishing to take advantage of this emergency, I reduced the price to only $5 each. Outrageous, even more so when the electricity came on 2 hours after her sale. Sorry, no refunds, Turtle said. No matter, what was $5 to heirs of an estate worth 200 millions? Clues. They had to work on those clues. Behind closed doors, whisper, somebody may be listening. Not all the heirs were huddled in plotting, puzzle-solving pairs. Jake Wexler had retreated to his office after a long, loud argument with his wife. He sure could have used half of that $10K, but he wouldn't admit it, not to her. The forfeited money upset her more than the murder of her uncle. If he was her uncle. 5 floors above, Jake's partner stood before the restaurant's front window, staring at the Forth on an angry lake and beyond. No one had bothered to tell Madame Who about the Westing games. Other players were snowbound elsewhere. Denton Deer in the hospital, Sandy at home. No one gave a thought to where Otis Amber or Crow might be, but Sidel Pulowski was there, thumping her crutch against the baseboards as she limped through the carpeted halls on the arm of her pretty partner. Not one, but 7 tenants had invited her to morning coffee or afternoon tea. Murder or not, they had to see Pulowski's copy of that will. 3 lumps, please. Angela drinks it black. Your health. Thank the Lord I'm still able to hobble about. Your job? I was private secretary to the president of Schultz Sausages. Poor Mr. Schultz. I don't know how he'll manage without me. Your shorthand notes. Thank you for the refreshments. I'm sorry, I must hurry back for my medication. One heir had not invited them in, but that didn't stop Sidel Pulowski from barging into apartment 2D. Hi, Chris. Just thought we'd pop in to see how you're doing. Don't be scared. I'm not the murderer. Neither is Angela, and we don't think you are the murderer. Mind if I sit down? The secretary toppled into a chair next to the boy before he could reply. Here, I stole a macaroon for you. It's so sticky you'll be tasting it all day. I must have 6 strands of coconut between my upper molars. Chris took the cookie. Just look at that smile. It could break your heart. Angela wished her partner had not said that. It seemed so insensitive, so crude. But at least Adele was talking to him, which was more than she was able to do. Angela, the fortunate one, standing like a dummy. I know Denton wants to work on the clues with you. He's snowbound. You're very pretty. He meant to say nice. How did pretty come out? Chris bent his curly head over the geography book in his lap. She wasn't laughing at him. It was all right to ask because she was going to marry his partner. What are grenons? Angela didn't understand. Chris fanned the pages of his book to a picture of a wheat field. Grains. Oh, grains. You want to know the name of grains. Let's see. Wheat, rye, corn, barley, oats. Oats. Angela thought the boy was going into a fit, but he was only repeating the last word. Oats. Sidel was puffing her warm breath on the window and wiping a frosted area clean of her sleeve. There, now you'll be able to watch the birds again. Anything else we can do for you, young man? Chris nodded. Read me shorthand notes. The pretty lady and the funny lady moved quickly out of the door. One limped, but it was a pretended limp, he could tell. Not like the limper on the Westinghouse lawn. Oats. Chris closed his eyes to picture the clues. 4 plain grain shed. Grain equals oats, Otis Amber. 4 plus D from shed, Ford. But neither the delivery boy nor the judge limped, and he still hadn't figured out she or plain. He'd have to wait for Denton Deer. He was smart. He was a doctor. Chris raised his binoculars to the cliff. Wind-blown drifts buttressed the house. Something moved on the 2nd floor, a hand holding back the edge of a drape. Slowly the heavy drape fell back against the window. The Westinghouse was snowbound too, and somebody was in it. Only one of the floor players thought the clues told how the $10,000 check was to be spent. Take stock in America, the will said. Go for broke, the will said. And the stock market, Turtle said, and whoever makes the most money wins it all. The whole $2 million. Their clues, C, Mountain, M, O, stood for symbols of 3 corporations listed on the stock exchange. C, MT, the abbreviation for mountain, ammo. But AM and O are separate clues, Flora said, to confuse us. But what about the murderer? I thought we were supposed to find the name of the murderer. To put us off the track, if the police suspected murder, she'd be in jail by now. Her fingerprints were over everything in the house, including the corpse. You don't really think one of us could have killed a living, breathing human in cold blood, do you, Miss Baumbach? Do you? Turtle said, but the dressmaker was a cream puff. Don't you look at me like that, Turtle. You know very well I could never think such a thing. I must have misunderstood. Oh my, I just wish Miss Pulowski had shown us her copy of the will. Turtle returned to her calculations, multiplying numbers of shares times price, adding broker's commission, trying to total the sum to the $10,000 they had to spend. Flora Baumbach may have been wrong about the murder, but she was not convinced of Turtle's plan. What about buy Westing paper products? I'm sure that was in the will. Great, Turtle exclaimed. We'll do just that. We'll add WPP to the list of stocks we're going to buy. Flora Baumbach had watched enough television commercials to know that buy Westing paper products meant that as soon as she could get to market, she'd buy all the Westing products on the shelf. Still, it felt good having a child around again. She'd play along gladly. You know, Turtle, you may be right about putting your money on the stock market. I remember the will said, "May God thy gold refine." That must be from the Bible. Shakespeare, Turtle replied. All quotations were either from the Bible or Shakespeare. Mr. Who moved aside a full ashtray with a show of distaste and rearranged the clues. Purple fruited makes more sense. Grace Wexler looked across the restaurant to the lone figure at the window. Are you sure your wife doesn't understand English? I mean, after living here so long? That's my second wife. She came over from Hong Kong 2 years ago. She does look young, but it's hard to tell ages of people, Grace said. Why was he glaring at her like that? Your wife is quite lovely, you know, so doll-like and inscrutable. Who bit off half a chocolate bar? He had enough problems with the empty restaurant, a lazy son, his ulcer, and now he had to put up with this bigot. Grace lit another cigarette and rearranged the clues to read, Purple Waves. You know, that doorman says purple waves. It must mean something. And that ghastly secretary was wearing a dress with purple waves last night. Not to mention her crutch. You should not speak unkindly of those less fortunate than you, Who said. You're right, Grace replied. I thought the poor thing handled her infirmary with great courage. Traveling mimosa, my future son-in-law says. He's a doctor, you know. Anyhow, Pulowski couldn't possibly be the murderer. Not the way she limps around. Besides, how could my Uncle Sam know she'd wear purple waves to his funeral? Who waved the cigarette smoke from his face? The murderer had to have a motive. How about this? A niece murders her rich uncle to inherit his money. Good sport that she was, Grace tossed back her head, uttered an amused ha ha ha. Not that I care, Who said. That cheating moneybag's got what he deserved. What's the matter? Look, Grace pointed to the clues. Fruited, purple waves, 4C. 4C? The murderer lives in apartment 4C. I live in 4C, Who barked. If Sam Westing wanted to say 4C, he could have written 4, letter C. S-E-A means sea, like what Turtle swims in. Come now, Mr. Who, we are both being silly. Have you spoken to your son about his clues? Some son. If you can catch him, you can ask him. Who stuffed the rest of the candy bar into his mouth? And some business I've got here. Everybody orders up. Nobody orders down. That coffee shop is sending me to the poorhouse. And your Angela and that Pulowski woman, they didn't show us the will. They didn't give us their clues. They didn't pay for 3 cups of jasmine tea and 6 almond cookies. And you smoke too much. And you eat too much. Grace threw her coin purse on the table and stormed out. Change. That's all he'll get from her. He'd have to beg on his knees before she'd sign Grace Winsor Wexler on the $10,000 check. That madman. Some pair they made. Attila the Hun and Gracie the Useless. Gracely Wynn Clopel Wexter. Heir, pretender, pretentious heir. First, the money. They signed their names to the check. Half would go to Doug Who's savings account. Half would go to Theo's parents. Next, the clue. His N on to the 4. Maybe they're numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, Theo guessed. I still say on is no, the board track star said. He clasped his hands behind his head, leaned back to the copy shop booth, and stretched his long legs under the bench. And no is what we got. No clues, no leads, no will. After 3 cups of coffees, 2 pastries, and a bowl of rice pudding with cream, Sidel Pulowski had offered nothing in return. Theo refused to give up. Are you sure you didn't see anything unusual at the Westing house that night? I didn't kill Westing, if that's what you mean, and the only unusual thing I saw was Turtle. I think the pest is madly in love with me. How's that for luck? Get serious, Doug. One of the heirs is a murderer. We could all get killed. Just because somebody zapped the old man doesn't mean he's going to kill again. Dad says, Doug paused. His father's comment about awarding a medal to the murderer might be incriminating. Theo tried another tack. I was playing chess with somebody in the game room last night. Who? That's what's strange. I don't know. We'll have to find out which one of the heirs plays chess. Since when is chess playing evidence for murder? Well, it's something to go on, Theo replied. And another thing, the will said no 2 sets of clues are alike. Maybe all the clues put together make one message, a message that points to the murderer. Somehow or other, we'll have to get the heirs to pull the clues. Oh, sure. The killer can't wait to hand over the clues that will hang him. Doug rose, snowbound or not. He had to stay in shape for a track meet. For the rest of the day, he jogged through the hallways and up and down the stairs, scaring the nervous tenants half out of their wits. Let's see, we're on page 46, and there are, how many pages? 182. If we read 50 pages tonight in 90 minutes, then, wow, we could do this in 3 sessions. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit more. Sorry I haven't been reading chat while I was reading, because I just get distracted and lose my place, but thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope you are enjoying the reading. I hope you like this book. It does give Knives Out vibes, right? It is a little dated, though. Okay. Judge J.J. Ford had no doubt that the clues she shared with the doorman were meant for her. But Sam Westing could toss off sharper insults then. Skies am shining, brother. His choice of words must have been limited. Therefore, these clues were part of a longer statement. A statement that named a name. The name of the murderer. No, Westing could not have been murdered. I do need to hydrate. She-Hulk. No, Westing could not have been murdered. If his life had been threatened, if he had been in danger of any kind, he would have insisted on police protection. He owned the police. He owned the whole town. Sam Westing was not the type to let himself get killed. Not unless he was insane. The judge opened the envelope given to her by the incompetent Plum. A certificate of sanity dated last week. Having thoroughly examined, keen-minded memory, excellent physical condition. Signed, Sidney Sykes, M.D. Sykes, that sounds familiar. The judge scanned the obituary she had cut from Saturday's newspaper. Sam Westing and his friend, Dr. Sidney Sykes, were involved in a near-fatal automobile incident. Both men were hospitalized with severe injuries. Sykes resumed his Westingtown medical practice and post of county coroner, but Westing disappeared from sight. Sykes was Westing's friend, and she remembered, a witness to the will. But he was also a physician in good standing. She would accept his opinion on Westing's sanity, for the time being at least. Back to the clues. Look at her, the big game judge, fussing over scraps of Westing's super-strength paper towels. Forget the clue, she said aloud, rising from her desk to put about the room. Nibbling on a macaroon, she stacked the used coffee cups on a tray. If only that Pulowski person had let her study the will. That's where the real clues were buried, among the veiled threats and pompous promises, the slogans and silliness in that hodgepodge of a will. In his will, Sam Westing implied, he did not state, he implied, that 1, he was murdered, 2, the murder was one of the heirs, and 3, he alone knew the name of the murderer, and 4, the name of the murderer was the answer to the game. The game, a tricky, divisive Westing game, no matter how much fear and suspicion he instilled in the players. Sam Westing knew that greed would keep them playing the game until the murderer was captured and punished. Sam Westing was not murdered, but one of his heirs was guilty of some offense against a relentless man, and that heir was in danger. From his grave, Westing would stalk his enemy, and through his heirs he would wreak his revenge. Which one? Which heir was the target of Westing's vindictiveness? In the name of justice, she would have to find Westing's victim before the others did. She would have to learn everything she could about each of the heirs. Who are they, and how did their lives touch Westing's? These 16 strangers whose only connection with one another was Sunset Towers. Sunset Towers. She'd have to start there. Good, the telephones are working again. The number she dialed was answered on the first ring. Hi there, this is a recording of yours truly, Barney Northrup. I'm at your service. Soon as I get back in my office, that is. Just sing out your problems to old Barney here when you hear the beep. Beep. J.J. Ford hung up without signing out her problem to old Barney. He too could be involved in Westing's plot. The newspaper. She would try the newspaper. Surely someone was snowbound there. After 8 rings, a live voice answered. We usually don't supply that kind of information over the phone, but since it's you, Judge Ford, I'll be happy to oblige. Just spell out the names and I'll call back if I find anything. Thank you, I'd appreciate that. It was a beginning. Sam Westing was dead, but maybe, just once, she could beat him at his own game. His last game. Having found what she wanted in Turtle's desk, Angela returned to her frilly bedroom where Sidel Pulowski, glasses low on her nose, was perched on a ruffled stool at the vanity table, smearing blue shadow on her eyelids. First we tackle our own clues, the secretary said, frowning at the result of the threefold mirror. Unlucky from the day she was born, she now had a beautiful and well-loved partner. There was always the chance that they alone had been given the answer. She unsealed the envelope and held it out to Angela. Take one. Angela removed the first clue. Good. Now it was Sidel's turn. Glory be. She exclaimed, thinking that she had the name of the murderer. Her thumb was covering the last letter, D. The word was Hood. Angela's turn. The third clue was from. The fourth clue read spacious. The fifth and last clue was. Angela uttered a low moan. Her hand shook as she pressed the paper to her partner. The fifth and last clue was Grace. Grace, that's your mother's name, Sidel said. Well, don't worry. That clue doesn't mean your mother's a murderer. The will says it's not what you have, it's what you don't have. The secretary had not yet transcribed the shorthand, but she had read it through several times before hiding the notebook in a safe place. By the way, are you really related to Mr. Westing? Angela shrugged. Sidel assumed that meant no and turned to the clues. Good Grace from Hood, spacious. Oh, this is a song. Fruited purple waves. Okay. It's the song. It's that American Amber Waves, I think. The only thing I can figure from these clues is good gracious from Hood space. As soon as the parking lot is shoveled out, we'll peek under the hoods of all the cars. A map or more clues may be hidden there. Maybe even a murder weapon. Now let's hear about the other clues. Angela reported on the clues gathered in the game room and during the day's comings and goings. King, Queen, Otis Amber said. King Otis, Queen Crow. Purple waves. Mother switched 2 clues around when Sandy mentioned those words. On or no, Doug and Theo could not decide whether that clue was right side up or upside down. Grains. Chris Theodakis thinks that clue refers to Otis Amber. You know, grains, oats. MT. Angela showed her partner the crumpled scrap of paper she had picked up alongside Sidel's dropped crutch during Flora Baumbach's tea party. 50 shares of MT at $6 equals $3,000. Broker's commission is $90. I checked Turtle's diary. She is not following any stock with a symbol like MT, so it must be one of her clues. MT could stand for either mountain or empty. Excellent, 𝘛𝘩𝘦 remarked. Her partner was beautiful, but not dumb. Read all the clues together. Good hood from spacious grace, king, queen, purple waves, on, no, grains, mountain, empty? 𝘛𝘩 was disappointed. It's not what you have, it's what you don't have. And what we don't have is a verb. Nothing makes sense without a verb. What about the judge? Judge Ford thought her clues were an insult, and she said something about playing a pawn in Westing game, and she had a clipping of the obituary on her desk. Angela handed 𝘛𝘩 the newspaper taken from Turtle's drawer. What's that? It was a knock on the front door. It was footsteps in the living room. It was Theo. Anyone here for a game of chess? He asked, leaning through the bedroom doorway. No, thank you, 𝘛𝘩 replied, very busy. Theo shied smiley at Angela and left. 𝘛𝘩 read the obituary in Turtle's newspaper. The words $200 million were underlined, but she found a more interesting item. Sam Westing was a master at chess. No wonder Theo's interested. Do you know anything about that game, Angela? A little, she replied slowly, putting the pieces in order. The judge says she's a pawn, and Otis Amber says he's the king. Crow's the queen. Oh well, it'll probably just a coincidence. We can't leave any stone unturned, 𝘛𝘩 insisted. As the will says, object of the game, to win. What did you say? Object of the game is to win. How about object of the game, twin? Maybe the murderer is a twin. Twin. 𝘛𝘩 liked that. The only problem would be getting the murderer to admit that he or she was a twin. Let's get back to my apartment. It's time I transcribe my notes. Angela helped the woman to her feet and nervously peered in both directions before stepping into the hallway. 𝘛𝘩 chuckled at her timidity. There's nothing to be scared of, Angela. Westing was murdered for his money, and we're not rich. Yet. We won't be rich enough to be murdered until we find the name, and by the time we get the money from the estate, the murderer will be locked in jail. In spite of the impeccable logic, Angela looked back over her shoulder several times on the way to 4C. Strange, 𝘛𝘩 stood before her apartment. She had slammed it shut on leaving, but had not locked the deadbolt. After all, not even a burglar could get into a snowbound building, unless... Angela, too frightened to notice that 𝘛𝘩 ran through the apartment with her crutch in the air, found her partner in the bathroom frantically tossing soiled towels from the hamper. 𝘛𝘩𝘡𝘠𝘚 stared at the bare bottom, then sank to the rim of the tub, shaking her head in disbelief. Someone at Sunset Towers had stolen her notebook.